Hello and welcome to the Gersnet Podcast, the independent Rangers podcast made for fans by fans, and where the content is absolutely free. You join us tonight on our flagship Sunday night show. There's no Rangers this week, but you know that could mean in some quarters there wasn't much to talk about. But you know there's always sound bites coming out of Ibrox, so there's plenty for myself and my guests to get through tonight. And you join us in a historic evening actually. And what is surely the youngest ever average age of a Gersnet show in the history of the podcast life. So I'm your host for the evening, David Wren. I'm joined by Ross Bennett and Dougie, who will help me chew over a couple of the talking points from this week. We'll look towards some of the other talking points, I suppose, in the week gone by, a wee bit on perhaps next week's games, but we've got something a wee bit different to go through as well, that will look back in the past 10 years in a different way. So there's plenty to go through tonight. But Ross, first of all, it's good to be back on with you. It's been a while. I think perhaps even as far back as the Champions show.
It might well be. I'm not sure I remember the Champions show. But it was a lot of fun, I'm sure. It's been a while. Are the barbers not open where you are?
I'm growing it out a wee bit.
A wee bit?
Oh, well, I mean, obviously you're struggling. You've only got a couple of haircuts left, haven't you? So, you know, we're going after hair, Ross. Maybe not the best thing. Anyway, Dougie, we'll come on to you. We certainly, the last time we were in the show together was the Champions show. I think that night we were full of happiness and optimism about what was left of the season. Unfortunately, you know, it didn't work out maybe the way we wanted it in some aspects. But, you know, we're now looking towards a week that will be of celebrations. It's going to be exciting. What you got planned for the title day?
It's my daughter's 4th birthday on the 14th. So on the Saturday, I will be most likely entertaining a bunch of children, which sounds a lot worse than what it actually is, but I am hoping to sneak off and watch the game. We spoke before around there will likely be gatherings around Glasgow, whether it be George Square or at Ibrox. I've still to make up my mind whether I'll socially distance appear at either Ibrox or George Square just to see some of the events, because I felt very left out of the last events. And you see incredible scenes all around Europe just now. I don't know if you've seen the scenes in Milan, when Inter Milan won the Serie A. Likewise in the Eredivisie with Ajax. And you even seen it in Maryhill, where Partick Thistle obviously won their league. And there wasn't any mention of not being able to see grannies going on in Amsterdam and Milan or in Maryhill. So I might make a wee appearance just with a wee smoke bomb in my hand and see what the songs are that I can join in.
Yeah, I think the key thing there is the social distance aspects. I don't know. I was surprised. I hadn't heard anything about this, but maybe I must have just missed it. I don't know. But I'm sure there will be celebrations ongoing across Scotland on Saturday. But going into the sort of news from the week, Ross, and we'll come on a wee bit to the weekend games and the sort of more of the celebration type stuff as the show goes on. But probably the big talking point, well, the main one certainly from this week has been a new signing, Fashion Sakala, which is a fantastic name, a truly remarkable name, and not only are we signing players early doors and getting players in the door, we're also signing players now that have got fantastic names. Jhajji, you know, fantastic. And now Fashion Sakala, which is just magnificent. But, you know, what have you seen of him? Have you done the old YouTube scouting thing on him yet? Or have you seen much of him live?
To be honest, I didn't need to do much scouting of him because, you know, as we all know, I'm something of a Zambian football specialist. I've been a lifelong fan of Lusaka FC. So no, do you remember under Warburton, and we would sign guys from Wigan or Brentford, and we'd all go, I wish we were scouting in some more exotic markets. Well, not going to get much more exotic than Zambia. He's been playing obviously out at Ostend, I think, so the same club as Jack Hendry. And as we know, Jack Hendry not a superstar when he was playing at Celtic, but has been doing all right in the Belgian league. So I've seen a little bit of Belgian football just by kind of having a look at what's going on with some of the players over there, and it's a good standard. Actually, it's not too dissimilar from our league. Ostend, not a bad side, play all right football. I don't know a huge deal about him. There's plenty of YouTube videos. Fashion Sakala, as you say, it's a fantastic name. I wonder if that's is that even great for Zambian standards, or is Fashion Sakala kind of like a Rab Anderson would be for us? I don't know. But I'm looking forward to it. He's a good player by all accounts. You have to trust the scouting that we've done. The scouting over the last 2 or 3 seasons has been, certainly above the standard that we saw for the 5 or 6 years preceding that. And I think this scouting department has earned a degree of trust. So look, we're kind of ticking all the boxes. We knew that we wanted maybe some reinforcements up front. Looks like Jermaine Defoe probably not sticking around another season. So it's good to bring in a striker. No one quite knows what will happen with Morelos, and we've been speculating about him for 3 or 4 years moving on, and it never quite happened. So, like I say, ticking all the boxes. We needed some extra reinforcements up front. We're looking at some, I think the right markets to be shopping in terms of Belgian football. So, yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, Dougie, on the signing and just the business in general, and you look at Offabor, who've also signed from Bournemouth in January. Well, we announced it in January. It's quite interesting to see how quickly we're doing our business and getting players in the door, especially when you look at, and we don't like speaking about Celtic too much here, but they are in a position where there's going to be a lot of turnover in staff and players. They've still not got a manager, whereas we have quite a settled squad. We've got a good manager, and we're now making signs for next season, which shows you the benefits of that sort of director of football model as well.
Yeah, it's good to get our business done early. Offabor actually makes me a little bit nervous because he's been on loan for the last 6 months of the season at Wycombe, where he was last season and impressed and helped them get into the Championship. But he's not been a regular since going back there again. So he makes me a bit nervous. I think Ofabor's probably a bit of a development signing. I don't know what our plans are for him next season. We definitely need to strengthen at central midfield. But I do suspect that he might not be around the first team next season. He potentially might be loaned out again. But Sakala, it was interesting some of the comments that Ross made there. As a dedicated follower of fashion, obviously I've done my research into Sakala. But one of the comments I had to do that. but one of the comments that Ross said there was around the scouting, and particularly that kind of Mark Warburton and the best in the business Frank McParlin did. We were picking up players in English Championship, English League One. Ross said it's good to get the scouting reach out there further afield. By some of the rumours that are coming around just now, it seems that we are scouting primarily in Belgium and Holland, and that seems to be the market that we are looking at for this summer's recruitment. But from a Sakala perspective, he's very low risk for me because both him and Offabor are Bosmans. He's very raw. The footage that I've seen of Sakala on YouTube, he's very raw. But he's got some assets that we don't currently have. He's a player probably similar to Roof, that he can play across the front three, but he's got absolutely explosive pace. And I think he offers us something slightly different to Itten in particular. So if Defoe goes and Roof potentially starts in the front three, if we do need to mix it up, he's definitely a different option than what we've got available to us just now, which I think bodes well. But one of the big things for me, competition. We had competition apparently from teams like Galatasaray for Sakala, and we're able to beat them. And I think one of the big reasons for that is actually our success under the Steven Gerrard era. We've also just won the league. We've had the European success in the past couple of seasons, and we've got the prospect of Champions League football. I think those combined has helped us be able to attract someone like Sakala, exploit the Bosman market, and it excites me as we go into this summer transfer market, because you said yourself, we've got a very settled squad just now, and I think we probably need to add one or two to the squad. Sakala gives us that different option up front. But I think the one or two additions that we'll make will be primarily in the starting 11. And some of the names that we've seen linked, such as Joey Veerman from Heerenveen at centre mid, they really excite me. If we can add one or two real quality players to our starting 11, as well as some more risks like Sakala, I think we'll be in a very, very good place for next season.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. And Ross, another thing I want to touch on, in terms of signings, there's also been links with some of our players in departing. One that's came up that's actually quite surprised me, but it's been talked about for a couple of months now. Yanis Hadji's been linked to a couple of clubs. The latest seems to be Bochum in Germany, who are about to be promoted to the Bundesliga. What do you make of that? Because I find that quite interesting. I like Hadji, and I certainly like him a lot more now than I did at the start of the season. I was surprised we signed him. I think it was said on here I was surprised we signed him. I also thought start of the season he struggled. Just I think in terms of the league games he started, he just couldn't get going. Comes back into the team at Christmas time, and I think he's been excellent. I think his best impact in a game, arguably, was the Old Firm game at New Year. I thought he was excellent when he came on, and he just provided a bit of a spark that day, and I think that carried on. I like Hajji, but it doesn't make me any less surprised that there is this interest in him, because I feel like he's a player, Dougie mentioned it there, he's a player who is still probably, for me, in that development stage. So what do you make of that? Do you think we've got enough out of him so far? Is there more to come? Should we keep him? Should we sell him if the price is right? I'm interested in your view.
I think every player's up for sale if the price is right. And Hadji's no different. I think Hadji, I get the sense, probably has a very active agent. I think that there's always been a plan for Hadji, and between him and his agent, which was get your move to kind of a predominant, or what am I trying to say? A real class European league. And I think he went to Belgium, didn't he? Played for Genk, which is where we picked him up. And okay, Genk, Belgium. Like I say, Belgian league is it's not top tier European league, but it's a good league. But he goes to Genk, which isn't a club at that time, which is challenging. So I can sort of see that they've now tried to place him at Rangers because it's right. The league is similar to Belgium, but you'll be challenging. You'll be top of that league, and that's your springboard to Premiership, Italy, Germany, Spain, wherever. So I'm not surprised to see him being linked. He has had a strong. I agree. Actually, the second half of the season, I think he's been really strong. I think sometimes Hajji doesn't actually get the credit that he deserves, and I think that's because that type of player playing in Scotland, he'll always kind of do two or three things wrong for the one good thing that then comes. So there's always a failed dribble or a failed pass or a failed cross. But then if you look at, like you say, that Old Firm game, which he changed and he was brilliant. But if you look back at the recent Old Firm game a week ago, Defoe's goal, which was excellent. Defoe did incredibly well, absolutely screwed Stephen Welsh into the turf. And finished beautifully. But the ball round the corner that we flick from Hajji, like it was superb. It was absolutely, very precisely placed to pull it around Stephen Welsh and for Defoe to run onto it. So it's things like that, wee bits of quality that show that Hajji, I mean, he's born in 1998, so he's 22 years old, very much still developing. He won't be with us for very long. I think there is a plan for him to move to a top league. Now, Bochum, is that the place for him to kick on and develop? It seems a bit odd, obviously just being promoted or what have you. I would have thought that Hajji, I expect he would probably be a record sale, which isn't actually that high in today's world. So I think Bochum would probably be a step down. And that's no disrespect to them, but some of the other teams that he's been linked with, Sevilla, Lazio, places like that, I could certainly see them taking a punt, because what is our record sale is not going to be breaking the bank for a club like that. Have we got enough from him for him to move on? Probably. He's probably replaceable. And the money that we get from that, I'm sure would be reinvested. So I like him. I like him as a player. I think I'm right in saying he's the top assists in the SPL this season. His output is excellent. He does sometimes flatter to deceive. He sometimes blows a wee bit hot and cold. But his output is good. I think we've got value from him, and I think if he was to be sold, it would be for profit. So that's the model. I don't know what more we can ask for.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think for him though, and just last point on this, I think for his development as a player, I completely agree with what you're saying there about Bochum, for instance. That's, I think, I mean, I don't know their sort of circumstance, to be honest, but they're probably going to find it difficult in the Bundesliga. I would have thought, I think any team going up would find it difficult. I know Union Berlin are starting to sort of solidify their place in that top tier, but they struggled when they first went up as well, after a long time in the lower league. So I don't know. I think he would be better staying where he is, or as you say, getting a move to Lazio Sevilla. But is he really going to play there? Is that going to work for his development at this stage? I don't know. In any case, I don't think he's quite the level of a Kent or a Morelos or even a Kamara in terms of that sort of ability and what he's done for the team this season. I think he's a very good player, as you say, but perhaps not quite that irreplaceable. Which actually brings me nicely on, because I think the only irreplaceable player in the team, and I saw Ali McCoy said this through the week, but when you look at our team, I think Kent is the one that we would struggle to replace straight away. I think, we've got Scott Wright there, who for me is looking really good. I like him a lot, but I think Kent is he's the kind of player, I say this every week on here, he's a player you pay your money to go and see. Him and Aribo for me are the ones that everyone, doesn't matter who you support, you've got to love watching them play. And Dougie, the figures being bandied about this week are 25 million. I feel like I've been stung so many times, slagging off some of the prices for Celtic players. I don't really like to comment too much on price tags, and we've been burnt before with Morelos when we've been on saying 30, 40, 50 million. So I'm just curious, what do you think about the 25 million price tag? And is that something that then, or is upwards of 20 million where you start thinking, right, we need to seriously think about this, or is he worth keeping? It's really difficult, because I think going into the Champions League especially, we're going to need players of his calibre, but it's a really, really tough decision. And what do you think the club will be thinking in terms of reasonable prices for Kent?
You've both said two things that I had in mind. Firstly, as Ross said, every player's got their price. So when you start talking 20 plus million pounds for Ryan Kent, I think you've got to listen. You mentioned the record sale. Our record sale at the moment is Giovanni van Bronckhorst for £12.15 million. I suspect that someone from this current playing team will smash that, and I suspect it'll be this summer. But the comment that you made there, David, around Ryan Kent is, for me, he's the last player that I would want to sell from this current squad. For the same reason as you mentioned, for me, he's the player that gets us ticking in particular games. It's his ability to get the ball and carry it forward that's so important to our system, particularly in the games like Celtic, where he excels, like Europe. And when you're talking about players moving down to England, there's a few players like Ryan Kent, Joe Aribo, Glenn Kamara that stick out for me as young, very talented, promising players who are domestically trained within England and count towards squad registrations, that I think their prices will be inflated. And there will be teams that will naturally look at them for that reason. I don't want to sell Kent. One of the comments I just made there is around them suiting our system. I think that's potentially one of the things that holds Jhajji back just now on the subject of Jhajji. I don't think Jhajji has yet adapted to playing that wide 10 role that we want to play. He doesn't have the pace for it. He has everything technical about him that would allow him to flourish in a 4-2-3-1, particularly central behind someone like Morelos. And I think that's potentially where he would see himself as his strongest position and where he would want to play elsewhere. Here's a conundrum for me. If you could get enough money from Jhajji, say for instance 15 million, right? If we were able to get someone like Jhajji for £15 million and replace him with someone who suits our system the way that Ryan Kent does, I'd take it. And the name that I'll put out there, and I've said it a couple of times on Twitter, is Harry Wilson of Liverpool. Harry Wilson's went away to Cardiff. He just scored a hat-trick last weekend, and it was one of the best hat-tricks that you'll see in a long time. The figure that's quoted for Harry Wilson's between 10 and 15. It's probably a very similar figure to Jhajji. But I think Harry Wilson really suits the way that we play football. He's very similar to Kent, but he's left-footed. So he offers that kind of balance to Kent. And obviously they've came through a lot of the youth ranks together through Liverpool. So I'd be looking to keep Kent. And if there was a player that I'd be looking to cash in on, if you were able to replace them with something that suits our system, I'd look to bring in Harry Wilson for the same cash. But the last point on it, you mentioned Champions League. For me, this is a season that we go for it because we have the ability to qualify for the group stages of the Champions League, which obviously brings the riches that it does. But the winner of the Premiership, the Scottish Premiership this season, will go directly into the group stages thanks to the good work that Rangers have done under Steven Gerrard. For that reason, that brings in 20, 30 million pounds. For me, this is a season you speculate to accumulate. I would like to see us try and keep a hold of our strongest 11 and add, as I said, one or two key players to really go for the Champions League. And for me, that involves keeping Ryan Kent.
I think were we not linked with Harry Wilson before? A loan deal? Who was that under?
Gerrard's first season.
Was that under Gerrard? He's a good player, though. It's an interesting point you make as well. I think Jhajji, he does suffer. I think Roof suffers sometimes as well when Morelos is fit. I think he's another one that doesn't quite fit into that front three we would like. So, yeah, interesting. It's good that you've plucked a name out as well because that's always helpful. I can never think of anyone that's actually realistic. So I was wondering, I was on tenterhooks there, wondering who you were going to say. But Ross, what are your thoughts on that? I'm interested to know in terms of that speculating to accumulate type thing. Are we a club that can afford to do that at the moment, or should we be looking to cash in on the players while the stock is high?
I think the model is, it sounds a bit cringe, but buy low, sell high. So, good scouting, develop players, sell on for a profit to richer leagues. But I think, speculate to accumulate is kind of really asking what are the finances like. There's been fresh investment into the club over the last couple of months. Season ticket sales are going pretty well. I think we've got room to speculate to accumulate. I'd expect to see we don't need a major rebuild. So I don't think we're going to see 7, 8, 9 new faces coming in the door this summer. But I think, as Dougie says, if we're adding to the team, we should be adding to the first 11 and adding with real quality. And regardless of the fact that this is the Scottish Premiership, we still need to spend money to be able to do that. Celtic have such a major rebuilding operation on this summer. They will be reinvigorated. They'll have a new manager. They will be bringing in a hell of a lot of new players. And we can't get complacent. And I think the management team will know that. This is certainly not a one and done situation of, right, well, we got 55 and we stopped the 10. Now let's rebuild. Simply doesn't work at Rangers. So, no, I think there will be a limited number of additions. But I think we'll be expected to pay for them. And I think that will happen.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I like your point as well, Dougie, about the sort of buying players to fit the model, because I think that's something that's really starting to take shape now, where we're bringing in players that fit our system, and I think Scott Wright's a good example of that. These are players that are coming in to fit into a system rather than signing players to fit a system around. So I think it's going to be an interesting summer. It will be interesting to see who we bring in. And yeah, I think it remains to be seen what the buying model will be for that and selling, but we shall soon find out. We're going to touch on a topic now that raised a debate last time. Completely one-sided debate. Cause I didn't want to go in on you with that one, Dougie. I wasn't majorly bothered about it, but then it turned into a thing. The people loved it. So I'm going to try and turn you and Ross against each other. And then maybe Ross will just agree with you and that'll be fine. But this Colts thing, now, since we had the sort of first chat about it, and I mean that was months ago now. It's raised its head on the national level on Sports Sound, and there's been some fascinating debates actually on there with the likes of John Collins and Jim McInally that have just been remarkable sort of ways of looking at football from both sides, like a sort of newfangled way of looking at it, and then a extremely traditional way, and proper extremes in both sides. But interestingly, there hasn't really been a voice from Celtic or Rangers on it, a real voice. And we're probably still in the same place now where we were when we discussed it the first time. Not really knowing what the clubs... Stuart Robertson's obviously spoke this week about it, but not really knowing how it would work, what we would see from it. And Dougie, I'll come to you first on this. It looks like the pyramid, the Leagues 1 and 2, that's not going to work out, I don't think. I think that's safe to say. But the new way of looking at it now seems to be the Lowland League, which I've not covered the Lowland League in my career, but I did spend a bit of time at the sort of south of, I think it's the South of Scotland League, watched a few games there. And actually the thing that struck me, having covered junior football, was the sort of, I found it quite boys club like almost. I thought it was very intensity wasn't as hard as perhaps junior and lower league levels. So that's an interesting point. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong in terms of the Lowland League, but certainly in that league below, that I wasn't too sure about the quality. But what are your thoughts on this latest development and the idea that the Lowland League could be opened up?
Are you ready for this?
I'm ready. I've been preparing myself all day.
So I watched the interview you referenced there that was available on RTV that had Stuart Robertson, Ross Wilson and Craig Mulholland. And I think that gave a lot of insight into where the club's mind's at just now. And the first thing that needs to be said is it shouldn't be Rangers that's creating the proposal and the blueprint for how to enhance the Scottish game and benefit the top youngsters of the Scottish game. It should be those running the football in the country. It should be the SFA. It should be the SPFL. And there was some not so subtle comments made from all three interviewed. We need to see more initiative and innovation coming from the top. There's nothing currently between the 18s and first team level. Scotland's the only country in Europe that's the case, and there's a lack of transition pathway. Player development must be on the agenda for the betterment of the Scottish game. The SFA and SPFL have never sent our proposal to other member clubs, and it raises a question: what does Neil Doncaster earn £250,000 per year actually doing? Because he's not bringing in sponsorship, he's not bettering the game. And what's interesting about the Lowland League, I don't know a lot about it either, but they approached us. They knew that we hadn't received a response, and they've approached us. And what's interesting is it's a trial. It's a 1 year basis. And when you watch that interview, it's very apparent that Rangers see this as clearly a benefit to us as a football club. But we're trying to showcase the benefits of what it is to the Lowland League. It's a 1 season trial. We want to put our players in different scenarios. We want to test them in a real competitive environment. Again, I don't know much about the Lowland League, but if you imagine there's nothing between 18s and first team football, players are having to go out on loan. So what we spoke about before, if one of our best young players is having to go to the Championship League 1 to get developed, they're being developed by a club that you can't control what their coaching is. Whereas if we are the ones that have the Colts team, that has our own coaching setup, our own facilities, we can embed those players in our structure and our way of thinking. And there's some brilliant comments, right? So I mentioned there in terms of the benefits of others. There was a number of benefits that Rangers have clearly put forward to the Lowland League. So it's, if we win the league, we will not be promoted. We're hoping that our presence in the league creates an interest that raises the profile of the league, and as a result, it creates a sponsor for the league that generates income. It brings a TV deal for the league that brings income. It increases attendances for these leagues that brings income, but it shines a light on the progressive clubs in that league. Now, I don't know enough about it to comment, but East Kilbride, for example, East Kilbride are a well financially backed club that I think are in that league. They're a team that want to get into the League Two setup. By us being there, it creates a spotlight in that league, and we want to be able to show here's the benefit to those lowland clubs. And I think the reason why we're doing that, and the reason why we're only doing that for one season, is we want into League Two. And if we can show the benefits to the Lowland League, and we can show that we are up for the challenge, and we go on and we compete well in that league, I think it puts a strong case forward for why we should be in League Two. And it takes me into the next point around, we should not be playing Lowland football with our Colts. We should be playing Championship football. You know, you look at the B teams across the rest of Europe, and you think of Barca B, for example. They're not in the bottom tier. They're competing against other quality teams. So I want to see our Colts team start in League Two, but get promoted to Scottish Championship and not have the ability to go between the Championship and the Premiership, which allows us to send our best young players to the Colts team to be trained, as I said earlier on, by our own staff, to be playing amongst their own facilities. And I'm going to give a really hot topic as an example, and I'm going to use Glen Middleton as an example. I said beforehand I was going to segue Glen Middleton into this somehow. Glen Middleton came off the bench today for St Johnstone in the Scottish Cup semi-final, and within 8 minutes he got an assist and he scored an absolute cracker. If we had a team in the Championship, Glen Middleton would be the star for that team, and it would create the pathway for someone like Glen Middleton to push his way into Rangers. Instead, he tried to push his way into an established St Johnstone team in the top flight that's performing very well. So therefore, there's no pathway for someone like Glen Middleton to get into the Rangers team right now. And if he doesn't get into the Rangers team, it's not to the betterment of Scottish football. And therefore, we write off too many players too quickly. My best mate was a professional footballer. He was released from Motherwell at 19 years old. It's too soon to be writing players off. We get into a big debate on WhatsApp a couple of weeks ago about guys like Harry Kane that didn't break into Spurs until he was in his 20s. You don't see players in Scotland being held by their primary club until they're that age. We write them off too quick. And I'm going to finish with a comparison, because it was Stuart Robertson gave a comparison to Croatia. He described them as a country of similar size as Scotland. They recently reached the World Cup final. 67% of that squad came through B team football. And the argument that people have said is, it's Rangers and Celtic that want B team, it doesn't benefit Scottish football. There's your argument. There was only 3 major clubs that have a B team in the Croatian league, and that team got into a World Cup final. It's that mentality that's holding Scottish football back. You mentioned the different viewpoints of Jim McInally and John Collins, and I think you used a much more eloquent phrase than me. The people running Scottish football are dinosaurs, and that's what's holding us back. I'll go into another rant. Someone like Billy Gilmore should be in the Scottish national team. He's not going to be in the Scottish national team because he's too small. He's too young. He's not playing regular. When Billy Gilmore plays for Chelsea, one of the top teams in English football, he bosses teams like Man City. Instead, we'll look for a big, we'll end up picking someone like Callum Patterson because he's big. That is a dinosaur. That's Steve Clark. That's the Scottish FA that's running this game. And if we carry that on, we're just going to be in the exact same cycle for another decade, until somebody else turns around and goes, we need to do something about this because, the game's not improving. Rangers are trying to drag the game forward in Scotland, and it's about time someone respected that.
Yeah.
Rant over.
Interesting. That is interesting. I agree with a lot of that. I actually think Billy Gilmore will get picked, though. I think there's such a media hype over it, social media hype, and I agree. I think he should. I also think Nathan Patterson should, and for the interest of fairness, I also would take David Turnbull.
I wouldn't, because he can't complete 90 minutes. I would take Ryan Gauld ahead of David Turnbull, and I would sign Ryan Gauld for Rangers in the summer on a free transfer.
Okay, Ross. Just in the interest of balance in this debate, I'm not going to try and make you say that you don't agree with everything Dougie says. What I would like to know is, do you have sympathy? And I'm not saying with the SFA or any of the guys that Dougie pointed out there. I'm talking about the Peterheads of this world. These guys that, go to the games every week, 300 season ticket holders. And it was an interesting part of that thing with Jim McInally, and there was an idea like, oh, how many season ticket holders have you got? Like, who cares, sort of thing. But I find this bit quite difficult, because I agree with the development aspect for players for both Rangers, Celtic, and the Scottish national team, and perhaps Hibs, Hearts, Aberdeen as well, if they were included. But I also have a bit of sympathy for guys that just want to go and watch Peterhead against Stranraer, for instance. Do they want to go and see Peterhead against Rangers B team? And I'm not saying I disagree with what Dougie's saying. I'm just looking at it from a point of view of these guys who support smaller clubs, who maybe don't want to go and watch a Celtic B team or a Rangers B team or any other B team for that matter in the league. Do you have a bit of sympathy for those guys?
A limited amount, perhaps. I mean, look, if you're in a, let's say they expanded in League 2 to 12 to let Rangers and Celtic in, well, I'm not very good at maths, but that's only 1 in 6 games would be against Rangers or Celtic B teams. I think that's about right. So it's a fairly low percentage, and most of the time you're still watching Peterhead versus Arbroath. So that's fine. If you don't want to watch that match because you can't stand the Old Firm, which is a very, very prevalent attitude in Scottish football, the ugly sisters and all that nonsense, then fine, don't go and watch that game. Plenty of other folk will, and it will have still all the commercial benefits that Dougie listed there. So do I have sympathy? Yes, a little bit, because I think people probably will go and watch teams like that because it's local, and it's not, I don't think we taint anything, but I think people might have that view. It's not tainted by the Old Firm, or it's not tainted by professionalism. Colin goes on his rants about modern football and professional and all of that nonsense. I think a lot of folk watch that kind of semi-pro provincial style of football because it's such a world away from what modern football has become. So I would have some sympathy if they felt that their game was under threat because of Rangers and Celtic having B teams. That said, the benefits to Scottish football, to our players, to the national team, to everything else, far, far outweighs all of that. So I'd love to sit and stir up some drama and say, I think it's a terrible idea and we shouldn't do it. But no, the whole thing about no pathway to pro, let's call it that, from 18 to men's football, is a shame. And I like that Rangers have tried different things. I like, you go back 3 or 4 years and we withdrew from any kind of league, and we had our games programs. Remember that, where we would just play top European sides on a friendly basis. I enjoyed that. I thought that I was quite sceptical about that, but I think it worked quite well. And what's good going in, if we do get into the Lowland League next season, is that we would still retain that kind of thing because of being in European competition. So the players are playing against less skilled, less kind of proficient men in men's football, and then playing the best of their generation in European competitions. So they're getting the best of both worlds, and I think that can only be a good thing. Limited sympathy for the fans of those smaller clubs who don't want anything to do with professional football, don't want anything to do with the Old Firm, but I think that they'll have to swiftly get over it because the benefits far outweigh any of that.
Okay, that was interesting again. But no, I think it's certainly something that isn't going to go away. And Dougie, just before we move on, do you think they should play the games at Ibrox and Parkhead?
No. You look at COVID just now. Obviously, empty stadiums, lower attendances, therefore, would be the kind of similarity. And you look at Real Madrid. Real Madrid are playing at their training ground just now rather than the Bernabeu. Now, obviously, the Bernabeu is being refurbed, and that's the reason. But if Real Madrid can play in the Champions League at their training ground, then Rangers can play at, let's be honest, a state-of-the-art 5-star training complex in a Lowland League. There's one last comment I'd make, and it's a comment that was made in the interview. About Rangers, I've looked through various different proposals. We've not gone with this is the proposal that we want to go for, and we're sticking to it. Ross Wilson said we're basing this on data. So the Croatia one is the reason why they've gone down the B team route. But they did look at a strategic partnership. So that's what Hibs and Stenhousemuir have set up, where it's essentially just a feeder club. Rangers would have a feeder club. Now, we probably don't have a strategic partnership formally set up, but you look at Queen of the South, for example. Rangers have, 4 or 5 young players at Queen of the South excelling right now. And the notable one is James Maxwell. James Maxwell has went away down to Queen of the South this year, and you get Young Player of the Year at them, and he was excellent. He's probably created a bit of a pathway himself into either challenging for the first team, or similar to Stephen Kelly, he'll probably get a move to the Premiership next season, where he does have a pathway, but it's how do you create that pathway for other players, because having feeder clubs doesn't work for everyone. You just need to look at Kai Kennedy, for example. I know he did do well when he was up at Inverness for the first 6 months, but he was homesick. He was only 17 years old, and he was up in Inverness on his own during lockdown and during a global pandemic. So he was homesick. That's the benefits of having a Colts team, is you're still staying local. You're still being able to be raised in the area that you were born in, for example, or you're certainly your surroundings that you're familiar with.
David, did you say that sort of the league that you'd seen that had a bit of a boys' club feel, was that the sort of the South of Scotland Football League, East of Scotland League, that tier? Yeah. I don't know if you've seen, but 20 minutes ago they put out a statement. So the West of Scotland, East of Scotland, South of Scotland League are all disappointed and dismayed by the actions of the Scottish Lowland League to invite Rangers and Celtic to have Colts without considering how they might feel about it. So I don't know if that cheers you up or makes you sad.
No, I thought you were going to say that they released a statement to defend the standards of the league after comments made. But no, I mean, see, to be honest, the team that I've seen play are a team from my hometown called Bonnet and Thistle, who I incidentally played for at boys' club level back in the day. And they were a youth club, basically, went up to under 21s, and then to get a pathway into the pyramid, they went into the South of Scotland League. So I went up to a few games to watch, and maybe it was just because Bonneton were largely under 21s. I just felt that the standard was good football. They're buzzing it about, but it wasn't quite. It maybe wasn't quite as blood and thunder, and sort of what we're trying to get, the experience for the players. It's about finding a way to win in difficult situations. And the problem I would have with that league is, how difficult would the situations be? How quick would the thinking have to be? I like the idea of, if this was to go through, I love the idea of our guys playing against part-time teams who know how to win. So I'm talking teams like Montrose. I mean, a great example, Montrose at the moment, proper good team, doing really well. And then others in League Two. I mean, now I'm trying to think of any, but Edinburgh City, for instance, all these teams that are really, really good part-time teams in lower leagues, I think that's great experience. My point is, if it was a certain level of football that maybe wasn't that, and it was about playing out from the back and playing nice football and building something at a club, maybe wouldn't get them the right experience that they need. But anyway, we've spent enough time on this. Again, it's taken over the show. So we'll move on, because we want to get to the big crescendo at the end of what we're going to go into. But before I do that, just another thanks to our partners at Football Prizes, who have put together another great prize, and it's a Paul Gascoigne signed and framed shirt. So that's available on Football Prizes website. Get all the details on Frankie's social media. Incidentally, Paul Gascoigne was on Italian TV over the weekend, looking very well, speaking fluent Italian. Good to see. But anyway, we'll move on. So I'm going to try and explain this segment that Ross and I conjured up through the week, and I'll try and discuss what we tried to do just to fill the time. But obviously, we're now 15 minutes left, so this will bring us nicely to the end of the show. So we're discussing, ways to sort of fill the time just with no game, and it's a particularly quiet week. So we come up with an idea. Now, I'm going to go straight into this rather than the sort of wee bit I was going to do before the preamble, if you will. So we're looking at a great team this season, a team that's unbeaten in the league so far, has won the 55th title, has done great, players all over the pitch. They're going to win Player of the Year. We've seen it with Football Writers. Fantastic team. Question marks over how it ranks and great Rangers teams over the past 20 years. So to balance that out, Ross and I thought, what about building a team that represents the last 10 years of the club, minus the majority of Steven Gerrard's players. So we thought it'd be interesting. We thought it'd be a good laugh, as they say. And we've all picked our teams of now. I don't want anyone to be offended by the term I'm going to use, but the banter years, and what that represents. So some of the players that have come in the door, and it doesn't have to be the worst player, but it can be the player that just represented where we were at that moment in time, and just shows how far we've come as a club. What I will say is, it's nothing against these players. We're not trying to have a go. We're not going to get personal. We're not going to slate them for hours on end. Just a wee laugh. Just going to go through some of our favourite banter players over the past 10 years. Now, what I will say is, I'll let everyone go through their team, but there's quite a lot of crossover, as Ross said at the start before we started tonight. So, do you know what? I'll let Ross go first. Ross can run us through his team, and then we can. Oh God, sorry.
I thought it was a theme tune for this.
I thought he was about to start singing it.
It was a work phone
banter years.
I didn't know was under my keyboard. But that sums it up. It's perfect. It's the banter years. That was banter. So so some of the names that were on the teams were quite similar across all three. But Ross, carry on.
Right,
your
from
decade.
From 1 to 11, aye. Right. So I've seen your team, David, and it's there's an actual formation there. You've thought about wing backs. You've got someone sitting in the hole. I've not really done that. I've gone for a goalkeeper, 4 defenders, 4 midfielders, and 2 strikers. I'm a boy of the 90s, and that's how I like my football. So, in goal, I think the easy one, or the obvious pick in goal, might have been Steve Simonson, given his caliber, given his betting ban, that kind of thing. But for me, the banter was summed up by the chap that we brought in from Poland, who made 0 appearances, and that's Maciej Gostomski. And that's a name that I don't think many of us will probably remember, but Maciej Gostomski got brought in, never made a single game, and left in a huff about 9 months later. So he goes in goal for me. Right back, I don't think there can be any argument about the Prince of Greece, Anestis Argyriou. And I'm not sure what he's up to now, but we very much miss him. And I think, what with Tav being injured, he could have done a job. On the other side at left back, and I'm not sure if he was a left back, but I'm not entirely sure he was a footballer. So that would be Sebastian Faure.
Can I just say, Ross, I did Google Sebastian, or Seb, as I used to call him when we went for a few beers in Glasgow. And he now plays for Goal FC.
Goal. Good for him.
Yes.
Good for him. That's the closest he'll get to the goal. In centre half, it's a shame for the boy, but Russell Martin, I think, might be the worst centre back I've ever seen. So he gets in on that count. And partnering him at centre half is Philip No Senderos. Senderos, who turned up in a transit van, got sent off for a handball against Celtic. Didn't really do much then until they got brought on in a mid-season friendly away at Leipzig, and that was kind of it. So he was phenomenal. In midfield, I've been a bit cheeky.
Ross, before you move on, can I just say, Senderos and Russell Martin have got like 100 caps between them, probably.
I know. How many top tier appearances do they have at the Premier League in England?
Senderos played for Arsenal, Champions League. I think he might have played in the Champions League final.
He played for AC Milan. Yeah,
unbelievable.
One of the worst I've ever seen. Midfield, I've been a bit cheeky because I've got three wingers and an attacking midfielder. So a very direct, very attacking team that I've gone for here. Firstly, Billy King, just because of the banter of, you know how this season Celtic were doing really badly, and so they panicked in January and they brought in the guy with the most Irish name. They go out and they buy John Joe Kenny. I think we did the same thing when we panicked. It wasn't going well. Billy King, right? That'll cheer us all up. Michael O'Halloran, good God, the less said about that, the better. And yet gets the move to Australia off the back of us, I think. Carlos Pena, not the worst player by any means, and I think that's what sums up this team. Is it's not about who was the worst players that we ever signed, but certainly not the worst player, but possibly the worst signing. And Dalcio tearing up the left wing just for that grin when he was about to be brought on against Hamilton. Again, I wonder what Dalcio's up to now. I had an honourable mention in there for John Eustace, who I believe is going to be signing in the next couple of weeks, so we'll look forward to that. And up top, two of the greatest strikers. Again, two strikers who maybe not in England, but have a fair number of top-tier performances in Scotland. Fran Sandaza for getting a move to Rangers and then immediately trying to engineer a move away from Rangers. And Kevin Kyle. Kevin Kyle will partner Fran Sandaza up top, the man who came into negotiations with a figure in mind, got offered 3 times that amount, played for another 2 seasons, then I think tried to become a professional darts player. And if I'm not mistaken, was last seen working on oil rigs and cruise ships doing the catering. So,
to be fair, right? There's nobody that would turn down that money that he got offered.
No, not at all. Not at all. But I think it's not necessarily that he summed up that period for us. It's that situation. Like he came in probably expecting to get £2,000-3,000 a week. You know, I'm signing for a club in the 3rd division just come out of administration, that kind of thing. And why would he turn it down? It was just the biggest payday of his career.
The weirdest thing about him again, and this is the beauty of this team. He's another guy that had scored loads of goals in Premier League in England. You know, he was a proper player. Yeah. I remember watching Kevin Kyle when I was a boy. He'd always been in the Premiership. You know, the one, A Beautiful Day by O2. U2 is the theme song.
Yeah,
and I remember watching him on that for Sunderland, and then all of a sudden. So again, not the worst player on his day, but sort of summed up the absurdity of it. But that's that formidable.
Formidable.
Now, Dougie, I know that you've got a few there that cross over, but is there anyone that you'd like to add?
Yeah, I've got a few that cross over with Ross's team, which isn't a good starting 11 when you look at it. Like, I know you're saying that some of these guys have played at the highest level. When I look at that team right now, I cringe. But I went for a different keeper. The keeper that symbolised the banter years for me. Like Ross, I had Simonson in mind because he was just god-awful. Sorry if he's watching. But I went for Cammy Bell purely for that playoff game against Motherwell. I think that summed up our banter years. Which then takes me nicely on to the other player in defence. So I also had Abdiru and Senderos, who shares a birthday with me. He's actually the exact same age as me. You're talking about as being youthful at the start of the show. When you look at Senderos, I kind of feel good about myself when I look at Senderos and remind myself that he's the same age. But the player that played in the same game and sums up the banter years for me was Bilal Moshney. And, you know, see some of the other podcasts that have had ex-players come on the show. See, when you hear some of the ex-players talking about Bilal Moshney, apparently he was just an absolute nutter. There was a story on a bus where David Templeton was flicking his ear or something, and he basically turned around and threatened to kill him. I think he was full-scale nuts, which I think Lee Irwin certainly felt the brunt of that in that playoff game against Motherwell. So he's in my back four, a bit like Ross's. Mine is a bit all over the place. But my other kind of proud member of my defence is Kribari. You know, again, this is a guy that played in the Serie A, but why this symbolises the banter years for me is when we went down to 3rd division, we just went out and signed everyone and anyone. You know, we talked about Aguirre, Forey, Kribari was it in Napoli at the time when we signed him and a Bosman? This guy was playing in Serie A, but he didn't look like a footballer at all either. Don't get me wrong, he was in the tail end of his career. I think he was 34 when he signed. But how that guy played in the Serie A is beyond me. Absolutely beyond me. So he makes my back four. My midfield, we share O'Halloran. Michael Francis O'Halloran. Less said about O'Halloran, the better. I think Warburton certainly looked at, let's get the pace. Let's just get somebody who can get the ball and run in a straight line. I think he thought Forrest Gump with O'Halloran, but he never was able to teach him how to play football because he doesn't have a brain. Sorry if he's watching. We promise not to get personal. But O'Halloran's one of these guys that just really grinds my gears, which moves on nicely to the rest of my midfield, which, it's not much better. Ian Black deserves to get into everyone's starting 11. Do you know, I sent my 11 to a group of my mates beforehand, and one of them was like, Ian Black was actually quite good for us in League Two. And I thought, like, Ian Black was an SPL player who he got a cap for Scotland. Of course he should be good enough for us in League Two. But it just symbolises where we were. We went and signed a guy who was playing in the SPL to go and play in League Two of Scotland. We didn't need to go and sign guys like Ian Black at that point and pay him however many thousands of pounds we paid him. You talk about Kyle turning up on a Calmac ferry, I think it was, for Kevin Kyle. Ian Black was rumoured to go and turn up on a roof, doing roofing not long after being at Rangers. So God knows what these guys were doing with their money. It certainly wasn't anything sensible. But on the subject of, the sheer symbolism of what we were like in the third division, of still just splashing that cash like we were a top flight team, was David Templeton. David Templeton makes my team, not because of ability, because actually he was a decent player. He scored against Liverpool a couple of weeks before he joined Rangers. But we paid £1 million for David Templeton when we were in, like, the equivalent of third division. Like, I had no idea why we thought we had to go and spend that kind of money on those kind of players, who by the time we got to the top flight, they were binned, they were cast off because they were old. They were, it's my biggest thing, my biggest frustration. We should have been building for the future. We should have been playing guys like Lewis McLeod, Barry Mackay. We talked about Argiri at right back. Was Darren Cole not any better than these guys? But there was an interview, and I totally digress before I go into my last midfielder. But there was an interview almost back to back between Frank de Boer and Alan McCoist that was on TV. And Frank de Boer was interviewed for Ajax as Ajax manager, and he basically said that he's writing off the next 2 seasons at Ajax because what they're doing right now is building for the future. Ajax went on to reach the Champions League final. Alan McCoist, in a kind of parallel interview, I literally seen him in the same day. Alan McCoist said, at Rangers, you can't build for tomorrow. You've got to play for today. And I get that sentiment. There's no room for losing at Rangers. But we probably didn't need to go through the entire third division, winning every game comfortably. We could have developed some players to play. And, for me, we shouldn't have been signing guys like Ian Black and David Templeton. I'm going to finish with my last midfielder because it is none other than Joey Barton. Again, not the worst player. Joey Barton played in English Premiership and he was a damn good player in English Premiership. But he just symbolises that period where Warburton thought he had to bring in experience when we moved from the Championship to the Premiership. He signed Senderos, Crenshaw and Barton. And Joey Barton spent the entire summer playing golf. And then he was a presenter for the Euros. He thought that he was going to come to Scottish football and genuinely be the best player that's ever played in Scottish football. It's one of these things that really bothers me about players that come from down south. They have this misconception that the Scottish games is poor standard, but he suddenly found out against Hamilton Accies when Ali Crawford nutmegged him and made a mockery of him that actually the Scottish game's not too bad. And it's intense, it's fast, it's close. And he symbolises the banter years for me because he genuinely thought he was going to turn up and be the big man. But my strikers are the same strikers as Ross. They are Kevin Kyle and France and Daza. Like Ross, I had a few honourable mentions. I had Russell Martin, who my mate said Russell Martin must be in your team because he kept out Bruno Alves from the starting 11. A guy that made it into the European Cup final, he kept him out of the team. How did Russell Martin keep him out of the team? He must have had nudes of Stuart McCall's family somehow. We talked about Pena. We talked about Herrera. Herrera went on a tour of Scotland. He wasn't here to play football. He was here to come out to see the sights. But the other one that one of my mates suggested was in Newcastle 5. we just inherited these 5 guys one day of here's 5 players that you can just have. 2 of them actually played. Shane Ferguson done okay, but Haris Vukic was quite a good player, so I'll exclude them. But Kevin and Babu, Rennie Street and Gael Bergmama, they've done nothing for us. We just inherited these players to boost the squad. It turns out that Kevin and Babu actually went on to be quite a good footballer. I think he's playing for young boys. He went on to be like a £10 million rated right back. But these guys just, symbolise the Mike Ashley era of, here's some Newcastle young players for you to have. And I think that symbolises how little he thought of Rangers and therefore how little I think of Mike Ashley. And that I won't go into a full rant of how I boycott every single Mike Ashley outlet, even to this day, because I'm that stubborn. So yes, that is my banter years 11.
Yeah, I'm not going to go into mine because you've mentioned them all. What I'm going to do is apologise to Stuart McCall for that needless mention, because I think he was about 4 years out of date there.
No, it was Stuart McCall that signed him, is it not?
Who, Russell Martin? It was Graham Martin.
It was Graham Murty, wasn't it? It was Graham Murty.
Poor Stuart McCall sitting at home, he's hot water bottle watching Gersnet, wondering why he's getting accused of that.
Graham Murty's doing handstands in his living room right now.
But I'm going to do something for the team, and I'm going to name a captain, and that captain will be Seb Forey. Good luck to you in Goal FC next season, Seb. I hope it's a good one. I think they play in the French 7th division, but you know what?
Lowland League.
Good luck to you, Seb. You were a part of their history, and that'll never be forgotten. Same goes for all those players. It's been a laugh, but it does nothing but remind us of how far we've come over the past few years. And yeah, I think some of those names, hopefully we've given people something to think about tonight as they go to bed on a Sunday preparing for another week. But if you have if any of the listeners or viewers have anything that they want to, any players they want to punt forward for the team, please do. You've got everything tonight. You've got a bit of B team football. You've got a bit of signing news. You've got a banter 11. You got my phone going off in the middle of the show. It's been a great night. And thanks very much. We've only got a couple of shows left. One show left before the end of the season. Which will be a preview show for next Saturday's game, I'm sure. But I think that's pretty much us for tonight. We're going a wee bit over. Thanks to Ross and Dougie for joining me tonight. And if you enjoy what we're doing, always subscribe to the YouTube channel, follow Frankie's social media. And yeah, until next time, good night.